So we're on.
We're live.
Yes.
So welcome everyone to tonight's Product Tank Vienna. This is actually the 13th edition of the Product Tank Vienna, this time digitally. And yeah, we have some really great speakers planned for you this evening.
So we're on.
We're live.
Yes.
So welcome everyone to tonight's Product Tank Vienna. This is actually the 13th edition of. So first, let me introduce you to your hosts for this evening. So I have my co-host, Naila. Naila has been in product management for about 7 years now, and she's currently working as a professor in the field of product management. And we have myself, I'm Mona. I've been in product management for about 3 years now, and I'm currently working at Magenta Telekom here in Vienna. And we're also very excited to introduce our special guest, Fernando. He's going to be doing a graphic recording of this event. So we're very curious to see that at the end and to share that with you afterwards. And also, as this event obviously is taking place digitally, we want to encourage you to interact with us through the YouTube chat, which you can see on your right side. So please write us and also ask questions during the talks, and afterwards we will answer all of your questions with our speakers. And for now, it would be amazing if you could write us something about yourself. So write us where you're joining from and also what your current role is. If you're from product management, UX, design, or engineering, we're very curious to know. So please post that now. And in the meantime, Naila will tell you a few words about ProductTank.
Hi. Thank you for the introduction, Mona. Well, for those who are attending for the first time to a Product Tank, let me tell you a bit more about what it is. It's a meetup series all over the world for product people by product people, and nowadays is one of the biggest product community worldwide, with over 200 cities, and now with more of 200,000 people who has been part of Product Tank now. And as everything is held online these days, you can attend to other Product Tank other product tanks in other cities, and you can watch them through the link that is here, www.mindtheproduct.com/product tank, and that's it.
Okay, thank you very much. I will continue with a few words about Mind the Product before we introduce our speakers. So as you may know, Mind the Product is the organization behind the product tanks, and they usually organize in a physical space 5 conferences per year in cities such as London, Singapore, Hamburg, and San Francisco. But obviously, because of the current situation, they switched to digital, and they had actually a digital conference this year already. And there is actually the next MTPCon Digital coming up in about 3 weeks on the 18th and 19th of November. So if you're interested in the upcoming conference, make sure to check out mtpcon.com/digital. They have some amazing speakers planned for the event. Also, if you are interested in content, Mind the Product provides great content for product people. So they post videos from the conferences. They have great articles on the Mind the Product blog. They also have a job board, and also events and product tanks are being announced there. Mind the Product also launched something very new and exciting, which is their membership. They have a membership for product managers and product leaders, which gives you access to even more content and also very special content. For instance, you can join Ask Me Anything sessions with people such as Marty Kagan and Jeff Gothelf. So you will get a lot of exclusive possibilities to get great content, and also get interaction with the other members of a program. If you would like to get involved in this community or the ProductTank Vienna, you have various possibilities. So for instance, through speaking at a local product tank like this one in Vienna, or if you would like to write for the Mind the Product blog, you can do so. And also hosting a product tank at your company once physical events are happening again. We encourage you to either get in contact with us or visit, again, mindtheproduct.com. And now I'm very happy to introduce you to our speakers for this evening. We have three amazing speakers. So we have Sebastian Ratcliffe and Nikolaus Horn, who are product managers at Riskine here in Vienna. And we also have Johannes Mayer, who is the director of product management and kununu in Vienna. And now I will hand back over to Naila to introduce you to our first speaker duo.
Okay, thanks. Thanks, Mona. So, hi, Nikki. Hi, Sebastian. Our first talk is going to be given by Nikolaus and Sebastian, and it's going to be about what makes for effective product management. So I leave you here.
Okay, thanks a lot. I hope everyone can see my presentation. Unfortunately, it's in full screen, so I can't see any of you. I'll just manage, you know. So basically, thanks everyone for joining in. This is Nikki's and my first product tank in Vienna. Nikki has previously participated in London, so he's a bit of a veteran. Nikki and I thought a long time about what we should present in this 20 minutes that are given to us. So we came up with we didn't want to bore you basically with a how-to tutorial on how to be a product manager, because most of you are product managers and most of you have a lot more experience in product managing than us. So we wanted to kind of talk about our experience in light of our different backgrounds. So we'll go into this in a bit more detail, but basically Nikki is from a UX design, customer research background, and please correct me, Nikki, afterwards if I'm presenting this wrongly. And I'm from a very traditional strategy management consulting background. But more to this later. First, we wanted to give you a bit of context because, of course, being a product manager is not the same in the context of a very young startup such as ours, and compared to kind of being a product manager at Microsoft, for example, and everything in between. So just to give you a bit of context, riskine is a relatively young company, young startup. We do B2B, purely B2B advisory solutions for distribution channels for banks and insurance companies, so the financial industry. So it's a deep tech made in Vienna, Austria. So we're not necessarily insurance experts, but we build intelligent algorithms and through data that make it easier for insurances and banks to sell their products. So we already work with 16 leading banks, brokers, and insurance. The biggest one, our biggest reference client is, for example, Generali, but we also work with Erste Bank, Allianz, Zurich, all the big banks and insurance companies. And our current markets, home base is Austria, of course, but by now we're already represented in Germany, Switzerland, Spain, and Italy. We were founded in 2016, bootstrap, cash flow positive. It means like no one is invested in us. It's all employer owned, and we're currently 34 people with strong mathematical backgrounds. Why am I telling you this? Because, and Nikki will talk about this in more detail, we have a not very defined role as some of you might have in product management, but we're wearing a lot of different hats in our company. Having said that, just to give you a bit of context as well on what our products look like, the company is basically separated in two business units, one being private customer advisory, so financial and insurance advisory for private individuals, still in a B2B context. We sell it to banks and they use it to advise their customers. and business customer advisory, which is still in the pretext is pretty much the same, but this is selling it to banks and insurances to advise other companies and corporations. So Nick is responsible for the private customer part. I'm responsible for the business customer part at riskine. And then we have what we call an advisory suite with a lot of different small products, some microservices that you can then combine, or each company can combine as they like. So this could be an investment profile, an intelligence funds recommender, saving calculator, and so on. So this is important for us because each client will have a completely individualized solution based on those core technologies. Yeah, and as I said, basically those tools are used by banks and insurance companies in an advisory setting, face-to-face with the customer, or on their portals and websites. And everything is, of course, API-based, which means that it's completely front-end independent. In a lot of your mobile banking apps, you might be using riskine and you're absolutely not aware of it. And that's how it's supposed to be. So who are we? And this is kind of the pretext for the talk, because we want to give you some insights in our experiences in product management, especially in the context that we come from very different backgrounds, as I said. To myself, so I worked in strategy consulting. It was a spin-off from McKinsey. So one of the McKinsey partners founded a small consultancy firm that was specialized in advising M&A mainly in Latin America. So I lived the last 5 years in Buenos Aires, and we were consulting US and European companies in M&A transactions in the Latin American space. And then after a couple of years in strategy consulting, I became more and more interested in technology and also in kind of the startup world and how you can shape the business as well and from a strategic level. So that's how I then started I wanted to come back to Austria, so I started looking around for kind of fintechs in Austria, found riskine and joined at the beginning of the year. So as you see, I have very little experience in traditional product management. What I bring to the table is more kind of a consulting framework to prioritizing features, to prioritizing where the company should go, what products should be developed, and so on. And not to bore you, I will now pass on to Nikolaus Horn, who will tell you a bit about his background before we then dive into different areas and different areas of experiences and expertise that we have at riskine.
Thank you, Sebastian. Hi, everyone. My name is Nikolaus Horn. As Sebastian already said, I also don't have a traditional product management background. I've spent many years working in UX, design, and research. I've been working in several digital agencies in London, where I studied before moving back to Vienna 6 years ago. At UniCredit, I worked as a design manager and created mobile banking applications for our Central Eastern European banks. So I have a lot of experience in designing products and going through the user-centered design process. But over time, I realized that my interest lies more in shaping the overall product and not just the user interface or the user experience within the constraints of the strategy I wanted to make the product strategy. This informed my move to riskine, working as a product manager. Sebastian and I have prepared for you a talk around 4 subjects. Sebastian? Because in a small startup like ours, product managers have got more than one role. We really wear many hats. And as such, we've been involved in all these areas displayed here, all the way from the big business strategy that defines the direction of the company, to the strategy of the product, the design of the product, and then all the sales and marketing around it. Why do we want to talk to you about these 4 areas? Is because when we came in, we basically had to dispel a lot of myths and understand how the role of a product manager in a small startup actually requires you to think outside the box and basically support on all these different fronts. Sebastian will take you through the first topic of business strategy, and I will then continue on the next 2.
Thanks, Nikki. In terms of business strategy, also being from a consulting background, my kind of understanding was, all right, business strategy drives product development. That's what we did in the strategy consulting projects. We came into a company, we designed a strategy, the CEO passed it down the organization. Now, as Nikki says, working for a small startup, it kind of works very differently. First of all, there's a massive tension between making money and pushing product development, right? And this is something that I had to learn to deal with. It's the tension, of course, exists everywhere, but I do believe that it's even more pronounced in a startup context. And what we did there, and where I think the consulting background helped, we created first a baseline. It's like what basically, and it's very simple. So what do we need to keep the lights on at riskine? So how many projects or products do we need to sell for us not to get kicked out onto the streets? And based on that, we tried as good as possible to kind of make our product development measurable. I have to say here that our founder is also has a consulting background, so so this kind of drives our overall strategy in a sense. So we try to make it measurable in costs versus expected returns. And here it's important to say as well that I mentioned in the introduction that a lot of the time we kind of have to personalize the experience for banks and insurance companies. So no insurance company or bank will have exactly the same product as their competitor for obvious reasons. So we try to make it measurable. It's like, yes, we can sell, for example, our risk analysis or advisory path to insurance A, and then we have to customize it for their special use case, but this is not very interesting, of course, from a product perspective, because at the same time we want to develop new exciting features. We want to push the product further. So managing this tension, I think, for me has been incredibly interesting, and of course, what comes with the tension is also the tension between the people in our company from a very technical background and the more business driven people in the company. So we have a CEO who's obviously very focused on generating return, keeping the lights on, and we have highly motivated, and actually the vast majority of our company, highly motivated technical people who want to push the boundaries of what is possible. Nikki mentioned kind of cooperations with the Technical University of Vienna and so on. So managing this frustration of technological people and business people, and managing the making money and pushing the product for me has been super exciting. And I think, I mean, what we are doing at riskine is making it as good as possible, making it measurable and working with that. But of course, that's not the final truth. And in the Q&A, I would love to hear your guys' experiences with that tension as well. Right. Nikki, do you wanna talk about product strategy?
So having arrived at the startup, I really had to come to terms with how product strategy gets implemented in this kind of context. Because working in digital agencies on big accounts, maybe an airline or a bank, we usually set out to create the best possible product in the market. Because those clients have got the budget, and that's in those times there were big one-off projects, and you had a big opportunity to put something in place that will really propel you forward. In a small startup, obviously that doesn't work. The typical kind of competitor analysis to understand what features they have and which ones you don't have and which ones you should do just doesn't work. Since our business is a B2B business, we sell to other companies that use our software internally. The relationships with those customers grow over time. And like with every relationship, you need to get to know your partner really well. That is to say that our product basically aims to improve their internal processes. So, for example, in an insurance company, to add value. So we don't, instead of selling them something new outside of their remit, we actually fix something internally. In this case, it's the customer advisory process, how an advisor talks to a customer about his insurance needs and the steps he goes through to, in the end, make the best possible recommendation. Sebastian early on showed our product suite. All the other products in the suite help to fulfill related tasks, and that is the kind of synergy that we're aiming for. That with every new add-on that customers use, they get more value, and this is how how our product tries to increase the footprint over time. I said that competitor analysis is not the right choice of tool. So what actually works? Coming from the customer-centric way of working, it's the same thing. You have to understand your customers well, but in this case, it's not an individual user, but it's the whole organization. You have to understand their business processes, their IT integrations, in order to find the shortfalls, in order to understand where they struggle, and that's where you and that creates opportunities for developing our product to add value. Next slide, please. So having understood how to actually land inside an organization, selling in, landing, and then expand from there, the question is, how do you actually create the design, the user experience, the functions that will work? In an agency background, there's this idea that you really need to validate your design decisions by end users because it gives you evidence. It helps you to defend your own ideas against the client who you're creating the product for. One of the many reasons why there are research projects ongoing for weeks and months, and it's and this kind of evidence-based approach obviously has its big benefits for business to consumer products. It doesn't work in the B2B context that well. That is to say that obviously design needs research, but choosing the focus here is really important, because thinking about interviewing people inside a company about their work tools, I'm sure all of you have got tools at work that you don't like using. And I imagine somebody comes around and says, "May I interview about your how you do your work in those tools?" There would be so many complaints and so many opinions that you actually don't want. You want to focus on the insight that really moves you forward. I'm going to get to that in a second, because my advice here is, or my learning is, to quickly find out which people are really just in a complaining mode and don't waste any time with them. Instead, you want to find those people who have understood who have actually found a way around those problems, who have created workarounds. May it be a little Excel sheet that does a specific trick or some other process. In Lean Six Sigma, this is called hidden office. So these are work processes that your manager is not allowed to see because he will not approve of it, but people have them because big companies often have ineffective software in place, and that's why people create workarounds. If you find these people and you can understand what they've created and why, you actually have already 50% of the requirements of the solution that you can then build, and of the desired workflow. So our design, our product design strategy is really around co-design, working with our end users, may they be advisors or managers, to get them to help us which are the most valuable areas to improve our product, because that in turn helps their internal business. There's just one word of caution when interviewing people about their needs. Working in a regulated industry like the insurance industry, there are lots of rules around how people should work and how they're supposed to go about certain tasks. So the effect is that the goals or the preferences of employees don't always align with those of their managers, and that is something to look out for, because this kind of tension needs to be managed very carefully. So much for product design. I think Sebastian has got one more myth he would like to dispel.
Exactly. Thank you, Nick. And I kind of want to pick up on what you said on core design, which I think is super important, especially in the riskine context. So when I first started, my understanding was, okay, you have sales and you have a technical role, and they have nothing to do with each other, because in sales you go for drink and you build relationships, and in the technical role you actually develop products. Now and again, I mean, we're still a small company, but here sales is very much a strategic role in which you start, which is basically the first step of co-designing a solution afterwards. So you sit down with the client and you first need to kind of understand what is the specific business goal at first, and here we have the tension again, because a lot of the time we sit down with like C-levels of banks and insurances, who are not the people who then will actually be using our tools, right? So they are very much driven by cost versus expected return, and so sales kind of starts already by first onboarding decision makers, of course, but also bringing into those sales meeting people further down the ladder who help you kind of drafting the requirements for the solution that we're building for those clients. So yeah, point number one, and I think we're quite over time already. Sorry for that. I'll make it short. So one point is we need to align on the strategic goal of the client. We then start kind of the developing the requirements that the clients have, and the requirements have to be developed in a way that the technical team, the developers, can actually implement it as well. And then you need to start scoping the project, and that's actually something that feels very familiar, very close to my heart from my consulting days, because a lot of the time what you do, you scope the project wrong because you want to sell it and you need to have a low price for it. But you need to be really honest to yourself and estimate how much effort it's going to take. Then price it accordingly and make sure that you don't burn out your development team, right, based on that. So the scoping aspect, the point number 3, I think is really important. And what we do to facilitate that, well, first of all, it's a very important role for Nikki and myself. We participate pretty much in all sales talks. It's I would say probably 20% of our time spent, but also our dedicated sales team are very heavily kind of included in the product process. Like, as one example, our sales team also participates in testing of the product before our weekly releases. Yeah, I'm very much looking forward to questions and suggestions to those myths and how we dealt with them at riskine in the Q&A. But to kind of come to an end, I will pass it one more time to Nick for the last conclusion.
So we try to boil down our experience of at riskine, from a context of having worked in expert roles in different industries and coming into to this kind of startup environment. One of our conclusions is that yes, it's really important to bring new ideas and new questions to the table, but be gentle. It's important to let the organization kind of digest them gradually over time. So I've been burned one too many times for asking too many tricky questions in one meeting. It's important to take it step by step. Another experience is that as a product manager, I really feel like the hub of all product-related information, and as such, it's important to keep the flow, information flow going to all the stakeholders. But again, the tricky bit is not to go too fast or to be all over the place. It's really important to manage this flow with intent. And the third aspect, and both Sebastian and myself have talked about this previously, is that yes, of course, you need to be focused on adding value to customers, but there will be divergent requirements and tensions coming up for different reasons. So it's really important to look out for those in the beginning to really understand the big picture and various dynamics that take place inside an organization and to be able to address those at the top. That's our conclusions. Thank you very much for your attention. Looking forward to your questions and comments in the Q&A afterwards.
Awesome. Thank you so much to Sebastian and Nikolaus, especially for your insights and your B2B business and your experiences. Was really interesting. And we already have some questions coming in, so we'll discuss that after Johannes' talk. And so now I'm very excited to introduce to you Johannes Mayer, who is the Director of Product Management at Kununu here in Vienna. And Johannes is going to tell you more about the importance of a compelling mission and a user-focused strategy on your product team, but also in your organization. So thank you so much, and over to you, Johannes.
Thank you so much for having me, and definitely also thanks everyone for actually joining and tuning in today. I'm going to share my presentation and jump right into it. So, and as per now, you should see my screen. As it's full screen, I don't see you. So if anyone could actually give me a sign or just shout out that you're seeing it, that would be awesome. Maybe Mona?
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now. So I assume you see my screen, right?
We see you and we see the presentation. Perfect.
Awesome. Cool. So I want to talk about the importance of purpose, mission, and user focus in a company. Quickly about myself, and not to bore you with too much information. So I'm Johannes Mayer. A couple of years in product management for tech products. I'm super passionate about strategy, leadership, and creating impact for users and businesses. I'm leader of a super awesome team of skilled people at kununu. And in case you don't know kununu, it is the largest employer review platform in the German-speaking area. As I always like to set goals, I actually want to achieve at least one of these 3 things today. Either provide you with concrete takeaways that you can actually take and apply in your everyday, or inspire you, or if both of those fail, at least entertain you. So let's see how that goes. Let me first ask a question to myself. Why did I actually choose this topic? Because I think it is super, super important. Because I think purpose, having purpose in your work, why you're actually doing things, that the things that you do make sense, motivate you, inspire you, and so on, I think is super, super crucial for the outcome. So I think it's super important, and that's why it matters. So how I actually structured this talk is more like of a personal story or anecdote about how kununu actually used to work in the past, the problems that we faced, and that I actually tried to solve, and then how we actually did that. And some of this might apply to you. Some of this you can apply, I think, to whole organizations. Some of this you can apply to teams. I think also some of that you can apply to the feature that you're concretely managing, the day-to-day interactions you have with your development teams, and all of that. So let's see. 3 years back, purpose. We had business goals, but that's not really purpose. So what's actually the higher intent why we are doing what we are doing? Also in the past, when it comes to strategy, there were pretty much new goals for each year. So there was 31st of December, and then there was 1st of January, and we started with a new agenda. And usually, if the stuff that you actually want to do makes sense, then it might make sense that you actually do it beyond an arbitrary limit, like 21st of December, and actually continue with that also in the year afterwards. When it comes to planning, yeah, we had a roadmap, but with way too many topics, some of them relevant, others not. You might know that because, I don't know, person X always requested that, or because the highest paid person in the organization actually wants to do that topic, or because you actually wanted to do it 3 years ago and you didn't have time, and now should be the time we do it. But that's not how you should actually decide on what you need to do. When it comes to mindset, I think there was much more thinking in features rather than intent or actually user value created. And when it comes to decisions, in my opinion, there were a lot of top-down decisions and some even directly from top management. So what were the problems we actually faced with this sort of behavior? At first, I feel there was a big lack of buy-in. So if there is no clear purpose, strategies, as I said before, in some cases, decisions are even taken top-down or only by product management, which is also as bad, you definitely face less buy-in from the whole organization. The second topic I feel was very strong. It was a lack of focus. So if there is little purpose, if there are no clear objectives, or at least tools that are supporting this, so for example, OKRs, you risk running after a lot of topics, while actually not really delivering a lot of user value or not really achieving a lot of them. And for the third one, I think we had a clear lack of user relevance. So we built our product not really based on what users actually needed, based on research, based on, doing our math, our homework, but in a lot of cases, actually what we thought was needed based on the highest paying person's opinions, decision, and stuff like that. So because of that, we saw a need for change. Before we actually go into concretely what we did change, I just want to quickly go over a couple of terms because I feel they're used quite interchangeable. So what is what? So first of all, purpose. Purpose is why do we actually exist? So in French, you actually want to call it raison d'être. When it comes to mission, that's more how we will actually act on our purpose. It's getting more concrete, and how will you actually want to bring that to life? When it comes to the vision, let's call it, what will the world actually look like when you've completed your mission? And in all of that, the most important part is actually missing. What could that be? In my opinion, it's people. So let's go ahead and actually take a look at how we actually restarted the way we think, the way we act, and so on a couple of years ago. So how we restarted the way we worked, and I'm super happy to actually also have Darius on this slide, who's a super valuable member of my product team. We formed a diverse group of people from all different locations, departments, hierarchy levels, to actually work on where we want to take the company in the next years. And back then, I was actually tasked with forming this team of people. And you have to know that kununu actually has offices, has people working in Vienna, in Porto, in Berlin, Hamburg, Boston. So we really wanted to make sure it's not yet another, let's say, product or top-down or whatever strategy, and then everyone just follows. But it's really from all really different locations, different functions, different departments, different hierarchy levels, and so on. So product, engineering, customer success, sales, marketing, really making sure everyone is heard and we actually can come up with the best of our skills and experience. And the goal was to actually, well, let's call it shape the future of our company. So rethink and actually come up with purpose, what's the mission, what's the strategy, what's the roadmap, and how we actually get it to life. And I posted a link there, which is how to create a purpose-driven organization, which was, I think I read it on Harvard Business Review and I found super interesting. So if those slides are shared afterwards, which I think is the case, then you can also check out all the links that I have throughout the presentation. So yeah, we got together as a group. Yeah, we kicked it off and we actually got to work. And one thing that's super, I don't know, helpful and I can only recommend to every one of you, I guess a lot of you might have already read it, but if you haven't read it, I would really recommend Simon Sinek, Start With Why. And this is actually sort of also one of the sort of main themes of my talk today, how super important it actually is to have a why, to really know why we are doing this, why does it, in which form does it actually provide user value or business impact. Yeah, and this is not something only you yourself actually need, but you can apply that to the general purpose of your organization. You can actually apply it to the strategy for a certain sort of business unit. You can even apply it for a single feature. And it's super important. And it's super important for yourself. It's actually super important for, let's call it, choosing the right bets. So if you actually invest here or there, if you actually go this way or that one, if you actually invest your resources into building this thing or this thing. I think it's super important for your users or customers, because what you actually do is then much more credible and sort of also makes a lot more sense in actual communication. I think it is super important for your peers, and I think it's super important for the devs you actually work with, that it's not like, okay, we're doing project X, and these are user stories, and now go ahead with that. But we're actually doing this because it solves a real user problem. It solves a real need, or we actually fulfill a real potential. And by this, I think actually the whole organization would benefit from that. So what did we actually come up with for our organization? So first of all, when it comes to purpose, we at kununu, we actually want to empower people to find the right place to work. And by doing this, create a better workplace for all. And I feel this is quite tangible. This is putting the user or the human in the sort of center of why we are doing it. And also it, in my opinion, clearly outlines why we are doing it. Because when you actually take working, I mean, every day we actually spend 8 to 10 hours, sometimes more, working at a company, working for a product, doing UX design, doing research, coding stuff. So why we're actually doing this? And if you actually know why you're doing it, and then actually helping people out there, I think this is actually a sort of, I don't know, huge benefit when it comes to giving sense to what you're doing. When it comes to the mission, we want to be a more, sort of a bit more tangible. And one member of the group actually came up with the metaphor of a good friend. So we are like a good friend who actually works at a company and provides you as a user using kununu with relevant and trustworthy insights. So while the purpose is sort of why we are doing it, it's very high level. This is really going one step deeper. As I said before, it's about the how. It's much more sort of tangible. And I think it's, yeah, how we actually define that as a group. I think it is motivating. And I think it again puts the user at the center of what we're doing. And at the same time, how I actually like that we came up with that is that everything you do afterwards, and being it a strategy, being it a roadmap, being it concrete features, maybe sometimes being it only wording for a specific feature, how you very exactly do things, you can take that and actually challenge it against the mission. So is this roadmap, or is this feature, or is this wording, or even sort of how you actually make a feature work? Is this something that a good friend would actually do? So yeah, it's actually something that you can get back to, and what you're doing actually challenge that against it. So when it comes to the strategy, we want to be a good friend to our users. So obviously we have to put the user in the focus of everything we do. These are big words. Let's see how we actually try to bring that to life. So when it comes to user centricity, basically, I mean, there's lots and lots of dimensions about it. So you can think of user centricity when it comes to mindset. So is this something inherently you're doing because you think it makes sense, or because you, I don't know, found it's a nice buzzword and you actually should step into it? You can do it in a strategic or rather operational way. You can do it constantly. You can do it only in a sort of way of select testing new features or new things. You can do it in all phases of your product development process or the product lifecycle. You can only do it in some. There's lots of different methodologies, from user interviews, usability tests, A/B testing, all of that. And obviously also depending on what you're doing, there's a variety of tools that you can actually use for that. So yeah, I mean, user centricity is sort of a big topic, and you can think of it in sort of multiple dimensions. Being a bit more concrete, I actually like this model from Ipsos, which has different phases of the product lifecycle. So first of all, exploration, identifying what you actually want to do. So which next generation product, which new feature, sort of which new, I don't know, part of your business. Then when it comes to guidance, yeah, sort of starting, making the first mock-ups and prototypes and actually optimizing that. And when it comes to validation, refining products so they actually have in-market success. Then the fourth one, after you actually launched, benchmarking, so actually making sure you know how the product is performing, closely monitoring that after you actually define KPIs. And then the last one, if it's out there, if it actually reached a certain level of maturity, the topic of constant quality improvements or cost savings, depending on the product. And to also sort of step away from this theoretically, introducing this model to how we did it actually at kununu. This is why I actually came up with this slide. And we try to incorporate user centricity in everything we're doing, basically. And while I think we actually have gone quite a long way, I think there's so much we still can improve, will improve, should improve. But yeah, I think a lot of stuff has happened already, actually. So when it comes to exploration, yeah, I mean, in the past, how we actually approached that was a new year starts. So what would actually be a focus topic for next year that we think brings user value? And sort of when you bet that way, in some cases, you might be totally right. But in a lot of other cases, and I would say it's the majority of cases, it might be that it just doesn't work, that it doesn't take off, and that it just did something that doesn't actually provide user value. So one thing that we changed early 2019 was, before we actually think of sort of concrete features of what we're doing, let's really sort of define overall sort of targets for this year. And at the same time, let's actually kick off sort of the biggest user research we have done so far. Because we might think that users need this and that. It's just one topic that's nice, that might be true, but in, as I said before, most cases it might be wrong. So we actually kicked off sort of the largest survey we have done so far, finding out what users actually like about kununu, what they find helpful, what they find relevant, trustworthy, and what they would actually need to sort of fulfill their user need, fulfill their jobs to be done, where they actually come to our platform in the best possible way. And this gives us sort of a super clear understanding of what users actually need out there. And yeah, so first, when it comes to exploration, of course, watching global trends. So what's happening, sort of the meta trends or the mega trends of society. The other thing is, yeah, obviously market trends, checking out what your competitors are doing, which might give you a glimpse of which topics are important or not. As I said before, and in my opinion, really most important, user research. So be it via surveys, be it with on-site feedback tools, be it, and that's a simple one, but I think in a lot of companies it just doesn't happen, speaking with user-facing teams, be it sales, I think more importantly, be it customer success, support teams, and really finding out from those standing at the front line, sort of what are actually the problems we have with our product, or what are the biggest needs that we currently don't fulfill. When it comes to guidance, so you already have a sort of a bit of a plan of in which direction it would actually go, and which product or feature would actually fulfill user need, or would actually tap a sort of untapped potential that you have. Then what we are doing is constant user interviews. So really talking to actual users out there. At the same time, also talking to people who are a relevant target group, but haven't used our product at all so far. And it's also pretty interesting, and that's also one learning to, as I said, have the very same questionnaire, have the same research questions, what you actually want to find out, and talk about this with people that actually know your product, and then do the very, very same with people that are in a similar sort of relevant target group for you, but haven't used the product at all yet. And then actually comparing if there is a sort of gap between that, or how these groups actually think differently about your product. Of course, you can do expert reviews. That's one thing, and that's always valuable. Another thing is, this is obviously in pre-COVID times, but as I was mentioning, Darius from my team before, what he loves to do is actually print mock-ups and hang them in the office. So you have a first idea, you actually know which user need you want to fulfill and how it actually could work. As soon as you have something, actually sort of pass it around, share it internally, and also have everyone in the office actually passing by, make it visible, make it just easy to comment on that, scribbling something on it, and so on. When it comes to validation, so refining the product for market success, we're doing actually lots and lots of usability tests. And these can be both moderated ones. So you're actually having a conversation of 30 minutes, 45 minutes with people that you actually invited. What we're also doing is remote usability tests on top of that, where you actually put out a task and you say, well, sort of imagine you're actually looking for a job, and this is what you're currently sort of looking for, and then giving a user a task that they actually have to fulfill using the prototype that you have out there. And this helped really a lot, in my opinion, as well. So it's not really difficult to actually build prototypes if you have the right people for that. And in quite a lot of cases, they really look decent with I think, reasonable effort. And it really helps you get a glimpse of where would be problems in understanding UX problems and so on, and how could you actually improve while you're building it. Maybe as soon as you launch the MVP out there, what we love to do is actually launch it to a couple % of users, run A/B tests, and actually compare sort of the old version that was out there and then the new version, the MVP, that was launched to a couple % of users, and then compare metrics. When the product is live, what we are doing is definitely define KPIs you defined upfront. More than a couple of times in the past, I have seen, okay, let's actually build a product, let's launch it, then it's out there, And then let's actually see how numbers changed, which is better than not looking into numbers at all, I think. But in my opinion, it's super, super important to actually define upfront which are the KPIs that you actually want to pay into when you're launching something new. And I don't know, my personal learning or opinion is maybe focus on a couple of them. Maybe the most important 2 or 3 KPIs you actually want to influence. Define them upfront. Sort of to the best of your abilities, do a guesstimate of how you actually want to influence those KPIs, and then constantly measure against that and see how you're doing. Yeah, when it comes to the last one, improvements. So yeah, optimize, improve longevity of the product. We do constant A/B testing. So even if something is out there and actually performs well, there is actually no reason to not challenge that and A/B test the hell out of it. And if it's different positionings, if it's different colors, different wordings, and so on, in a couple of cases where you thought, hey, it's performing pretty well, there's so much to be gained because you just didn't think of it. That's why I also think this is super, super valuable. Yeah, also what we have is an on-site feedback tool where we actually ask users for their satisfaction and then collect real user feedback. And also in this phase, when it's live and when it's out there, have a constant dialogue with user-facing teams. I think that's super, super important. So what has changed since then? In my opinion, purpose and strategy were super important. So having a clear purpose actually made sure there's a much larger buy-in from people from across the whole organization. We now have a 3-year strategy. So it's not like at the beginning of the year, okay, let's throw everything overboard what we actually did last year and start new. But when you actually have a strategy that makes sense, then yes, you might adapt that on the way as you go. But on the bigger picture, it has to make sense for more than 1 year in most cases. I would definitely advise focus on a few topics that actually make a big impact, that actually make a difference, and don't try to chase a lot of small topics. And all the topics you're actually pursuing must follow your purpose or strategy. User focus. As I said before, so everything we do for the user, and you can't repeat that in the organization too often, in my opinion. Really make sure you have user-focused KPIs. So KPIs that really express the user benefit that you're actually adding by what you're doing. And yeah, as I quickly mentioned before, have initial user research to define the strategy and the big topics. When it comes to planning and processes, so about 2 years ago, we actually implemented OKRs. We have them yearly on a company level with a half-year check if they still make sense. And we constantly currently have them quarterly on a team or objective level. I feel that actually introducing OKRs to the organization helped us immensely when it comes to minimizing distractions. Because as simple as that, you actually have company goals until end of year, and you have quarterly OKRs that actually help you define sort of in a shorter time frame of what you actually want to achieve. And if something doesn't pay into that, then you're just not doing it. And as simple as that. So we actually managed to minimize distractions by, I don't know, like a really, really big deal. And yeah, obviously what's also super helpful is a dedicated sort of standing team of engineers, so an engineering team with one product manager in a sort of, let's say, mid to long-term setup, because actually starting that relationship, making sure you actually get to know each other, you're finding a good way of working, you come into a performance mode. I mean, that is not easy, that takes time. So making sure this setup is as constant with as little changes and interruptions, I guess that's super important as well. So I'm a bit over time. So I'm trying to be super fast with the 10 steps, because I guess most of you actually also want to take away something in a compact form. So these are my 10 steps to actually improve your team or org by adding purpose and user-centricity. So as I said before, start defining a user-focused purpose. And this might be for your whole org. This might be for a part of your business. This might be for just one single feature. Share it with the organization, really making sure everyone is aware of why you're actually doing, why you are doing it. I think that's super important. Have people act as change agents. So what you saw before, when we actually picked this team of diverse people from all locations, from all the teams, from different functions and so on, that immensely helped to actually bring this new purpose and strategy into the whole organization. So if it was just a product only thing or just a, I don't know, management team only thing, I'm sure it would never have worked out as good as it did actually. Constantly emphasize the why. I think that's super important. So really making sure everyone is aware why we are doing that. So why do we actually have this purpose? Why are we developing X or Z? Because it helps the user fulfill their need in this or that way. And I think that's super important to actually make sure everyone's aware of that. Challenge everything against it. You working as product managers, most of you, I guess, face situations where, I don't know, the CEO or marketing team or whoever has this next hot thing and actually want to do it and want to do it right now. I think if you have a purpose that makes sense, if you have a strategy that makes sense and you have a buy-in, then there should be little reason to actually throw overboard what you're currently doing just because for the next best thing. So really make sure to challenge everything against it, which should also lead to much less distractions and to a much higher focus on what you actually set yourself as goals. When it comes to user focus, get a clear understanding about your users. And as simple as that sounds, in a lot of cases, we, I don't know, take some numbers from reporting tools, and then we actually make up our assumptions. Yeah, this has to be this and that because, I don't know, this grew or declined over the last year and so on. I mean, you can do that. In a lot of cases, you again might be right. In a lot of cases, you might be wrong. So get a clear understanding about the users, meaning also when it comes to motive research. So why are you actually here? What's actually the job that you want to get done today? And how can we actually help you with that? I think these really, really fundamental questions you have to be super clear about, so you don't run into assumptions and build something that might be hit or might be missed. Define KPIs which prove you actually create user value. I think that's super important. So when it comes to KPIs, yes, you can say, I don't know, change X from so and so many million to so and so many, or do this or do that. And that's all nice. And you might have done that in the past. I'm super heavily advocating for defining KPIs that actually prove that you created user value. Being it sort of user satisfaction with overall product, with some features of it. Being it asking users, did you actually achieve what you came for? Was the information relevant? So as sort of asking as directly and with as little detours as possible. Establish a holistic user research plan. So across the whole year, across the quarters, what do you actually want to test? With which research question? What is the outcome you expect? And then really making sure you plan it in. Because I feel also from previous experiences, otherwise it's not going to happen. And then get into a mode of constant user validation. So I think some teams actually struggle with, yeah, okay, so we built this and that, and it's already sort of finished. And now let's do some user validation. And then what could be a risk of that is actually you try to validate what you built already, and you just want to get a positive sort of approval. Hey, what I built actually does make sense. I think in a lot of cases, that's too late. So really make it a habit. As soon as you have something you can actually share with someone, and in some cases, it might just be a piece of paper with some drawings. Does that already make sense to you, yes or no? I think is super, super relevant and helpful. And the last one, regularly share user feedback and findings with the whole organization. So it's nice that you in product actually know what you're doing, or your UX experts, user research experts, but it's super motivating for the whole org if they actually see sort of what we put as a strategy, what we actually coded, what we actually marketed, and so on, really makes an impact out there. So really regularly share that with the organization. Good. I come to the end of my talk. For the last two slides, just some interesting reads and final credits. I think as product managers, we should aim to inspire each other. So just put a couple of resources out there what I like to read. I love to read the blog of Silicon Valley Product Group. I really like the blog of Andrew Chen, who's working at Andreessen Horowitz. He's super keen about startups, growth, business models. Dan Olson, author of the Lean Product Playbook. Christina Woodke, when it comes to leadership, teams, culture, OKRs. I really like the blog of Tim Herbig, who was a former colleague of ours working at Xing. And when it comes to the template, this was by Slides Carnival and the photographs by Unsplash. So thanks a lot, everyone. And if you want to get in touch with me later, just add me on LinkedIn, and I'm more than happy to actually connect with you.
Thank you very much, Johannes, for your talk. Was pretty interesting. It gave me lots of insights about product perspective and culture perspective. Actually, I have some questions, but let's start the Q&A. So I'm going to bring them all. Hi, Sebastian. Hi, Nikki. Hi, Mona.
Hello.
Hello, everyone.
Hi.
So, we're going to start our Q&A, and we have a first question that is for either Nikki or Sebastian, in particular Sebastian. You mentioned the tension between technologists and business people. In this respect, how do you like your engineering managers to position themselves?
Super interesting question. And to start off, like being completely honest, there's no silver bullet, right? What I really like what Johannes actually said, that you need to define a common purpose, and I think like everything else kind of follows them. When what I mean by that, and I'll come to the actual question in a second, is what I do with my team, and that's something that we did in consulting as well. It's very important that the entire team knows what's going on, just as Johannes said. So if the engineering managers and the head of development and whatnot, if they know like the common goal that we're working towards, could be a common vision or could be like revenue targets, right? I think then the positioning between product and business, or tech and business, becomes, you can smooth it over. It will always exist. As soon as you start kind of trying to put a timeline on product development, you will have tension because business wants it short and product wants it long. So that's why I mean there's no silver bullet. But I think what Johannes said of creating a common vision, and then have your engineering kind of managers also work towards the same goal and same vision, that really helps.
Yeah, for sure. Having a common culture is very important to achieve.
I mean, less the culture and more kind of very specific goals.
Yeah, you're completely goals and vision. Vision is very important. And we also have another question here that is, what do you do if you don't have access to end users? Nikki, I think you were talking about it, and also Johannes, in your talk, you talk about users, and what can you do in this case?
I can say a few words about this, but probably Johannes wants to add something too. I've been in this situation before where access to end users is difficult. Oftentimes, this happens in a B2B context where the people who pay for the project are not actually in the same place as the end users, and they're not in the same organization, and they can't give you access to it. From my point of view, there are multiple approaches. I mean, one aspect is, and I try this whenever I can, is to use mystery shopping. So really try and put yourself in the position of being a customer of that organization, and try to get as close to the people that would be using your product. So instead of going the official route via the client organization, you use your own situation as being a consumer to act as to the mystery shopping. If those users are deep inside an organization and are not client-facing, then you can approach the problem in a different way and say, well, whose problems am I actually trying to solve with this product? Because it might not actually be a user problem, but it might be an organizational problem, talking about a business operation or a business process. And if that's the case, then going for desk research or other kinds of investigations that you can do by yourself might be appropriate. Yeah, I mean, I personally have never actually had zero access to users, because there's always a way. But yeah, you have to be really tenacious.
Johannes, do you want to add something?
Yeah, sure. So thanks, Mika, for the question. I think for the most part, we actually try to be as much in contact with actual users as possible. So when you actually leave a company review on kununu or give a salary data point and so on, then we actually have you in the system. And what we regularly do is actually invite users to participate in surveys of sort of participating to actually create kununu in an even better way for you users out there. So we actually make sure it's users that actually have used the product before. If you can't do that, I think it's important to have a somewhat of an understanding of what different sort of user groups, target groups are, and then work with usability agencies and when it comes to getting a pool of users that actually they fit into what you are looking for. So let's say one, I don't know, target group could be people who are currently looking for a job. So when it comes to actually recruiting those people to have interviews, sort of define the criteria that are most important, so it is as close as sort of to what user group's problem you want to solve. That would be my advice if you don't have direct access to end users.
Thank you, Johannes. I have another question from Florian. Sebastian, you talked earlier about bootstrapping, keeping the lights on while financing the product development. How did you manage to solve this hen-egg issue?
I think that's a problem that a lot of startups obviously deal with, and it's super difficult. And maybe I want to kind of combine it with a question by Erich, who was talking about serial products versus kind of customized consumer project-based work. And at riskine, we have both. We have super heavily customized advisory paths for banks and insurance, and we have very kind of scalable products. And obviously, we want to push the latter. We want to push the scalable products, but we need the customer project, the customization to keep the lights on at the moment. So there's always the tension between those two types of products, wanting to push the scalable ones, because at the end of the day, we want to kind of grow, and we don't want to put resources on projects. And what we do to kind of solve that tension is a very heavy invest on our side. What I mean by that is for each proposal that we send to a customer, be it a bank or insurance company, we actually have multiple meetings with the total leadership of the company. So our CEO, CTO, and either Nick or myself, depending on what business unit it is, right? Whether it's business or private customers. And we go through multiple rounds and we decide kind of how big a financial opportunity is this, and how big a product opportunity is this. And then we put this into the context of our product roadmap, like how much further along does it get us in our product roadmap? And we discuss it in the context of keeping the lights on, right? Like how far away are we from our annual target? And based on that, we make the decision whether we pursue that project or we adapt it. And obviously, this is an extremely costly process when you have the time of the entire leadership in multiple meetings before sending out offers and before actually going into cooperation there. But we see that it's a necessary investment.
Yeah, for sure. Let me continue with another question. Here is a question for Johannes. How do you define effective product management, and what are the KPIs used in your companies that make sure you constantly have to transparent visibility on the level of effectiveness aimed for? But I think everyone can answer also.
I would have guessed it's rather directed to Sebastian and Nikki, because it was also part of the title when it comes to effectiveness, but I'm not sure.
It was everyone who wants to answer, but
I mean, I guess we can both answer it. For us currently, a super important KPI and basically what everything boils down to is recurring revenue, right? And this goes into the debate that we had before between serial products and customization. So I think the key KPI that we are currently as a company looking at is recurring revenues, and then you obviously have a lot of smaller KPIs that pay into that main KPI. That can be same as in every other company. Usage data, which types of features in our very complex advisory settings, what type of features are actually being used and actually help fulfill the goal of the company. So yeah, but I think it's important to everything is an optimization problem, right? So you have to define one parameter that you optimize towards which is recurring revenue, and then you have KPIs that are below that and pay into that goal. I don't know, Johannes, if you wanna add to that.
Yeah, for sure. So how would I define effective product management? I think that's a great question. I think I would define effective product management in how good you actually are in solving users' problems. As simple as that. And if you run a B2B product, if you run a B2C product, I mean, there's some need or unmet potential or whatever that your users have. And the better you actually try to discover that, get a good grip on that, understand that, and then solve it in the most effective way, I think that's effective product management. When it comes to KPIs used, I can tell you only what we are using. So we are using NPS when it comes to the overall satisfaction. It has its advantages, it has its disadvantages, because yes, on the one hand, it actually says it expresses some general satisfaction with what you're doing. On the other hand, we found out it's quite difficult if you want to ask specifically for the satisfaction with a concrete, I don't know, feature or a part of your product, that people have in their minds the whole history of what they like or don't like about your product. If they made a shitty experience in the past with customer service or this and that, then they might vote in a sort of, I don't know, 0 to 6, whatever NPS way. And it's quite hard if you actually want to ask specifically how they like this or that concrete topic. Other topics are obviously conversion rates. So how good of a job are we actually doing converting users who consume what we have on the platform to actually giving their insights as well. So writing a company review or giving a salary data point. And the last one, yeah, I think what super matters to us is actually the topic of relevance and trustworthiness for the user. So if you inform yourself about a company, can I actually trust the reviews that are out there? So that is something we actually ask in dedicated surveys. How trustworthy or relevant do you find these or those data points and sections of the product? Hope that answered the question.
We have another question. Yeah, you want to?
No, sorry. I think just to kind of close that topic, I 100% agree with Johannes. What you're trying to do is you solve, like, effective product management means you solve a consumer product problem, as you say. When you solve a problem, you create value, and when you create value, especially in the B2B context, the company pours more money into it. So basically, what we realize in the B2B context is that unfortunately is the money that talks, and when it creates value, they pay for it, and if it doesn't, they stop and replace you, right? So this is kind of what I meant by defining this kind of one underlying issue.
Sure. We have one question from Eric. I hope I said it right. What's the aim, having a service intense individual product or a one-fits-all serial product?
I think Sebastian touched on that already, right?
Yep.
The goal is definitely having kind of a serial product with as little customization as possible. But yes, we touched upon this, I think, before.
Yeah. Sorry. Then we have this one also. Johannes, what kind of product frameworks or tools are you working with to connect the purpose all the way down to daily task, from product strategy to stories to tasks?
I think that's an excellent question. And to be fully honest with you, I don't have I didn't really use this or that product framework or so per se. As I said before, in this section of interesting reads or credits, I think that there are very capable people in the space, and some of them obviously happen to be in San Francisco and working for the big tech companies out there. I try to be inspired by their experiences. The framework that I did for this project of actually making sure this group of people from the whole company comes into something is, I generally like going from the broader things to the more detailed things. Let's put it like that. So in German, you would say from groben ins Feine gehen, and that's what's super relevant to me. So generally speaking, I don't like going into, hey, let's build feature A or B, or let's do this or that, if it doesn't follow a greater purpose actually. And it doesn't have to be a super academic, long-term, 5-year plan, whatever thing. But as I said before, if you actually have a purpose, if you have a mission, if you then actually say, okay, that's the strategy we want to achieve, let's say in this year, then you define KPIs that you actually can measure if that was successful or not. And then you actually define initiatives that would pay or positively influence, pay into those KPIs. And then I would say what's super important is start lean. So we did that with a couple of new launches. So we launched salary. So you get salary information on super concrete job roles for every company. We launched cultural information on companies. And yeah, I mean, every one of us, I guess, knows the MVP approach, a lean approach. I can only advocate for that. Just really making sure you get an understanding of what users want. And you build the first very simple version of that actually fulfills 80% of those most important jobs to be done. And then you check it out with the KPIs that you actually defined. You measure if you're doing a good job. And then based on constant feedback, you actually constantly improve it. That I would say.
I think
that did answer your question or not. If it did not answer your question, I would say feel free to actually connect on LinkedIn afterwards.
Yeah, sure. Mona, is this the last one, or we have time for more?
I think, I mean, we definitely have time for this question. Feel free to get it out there. Yeah.
So
yeah, we can answer this one. I also think there was one from Florian above that we didn't answer yet, so we can answer this one right afterwards. So hi, Lucas. So everyone, yeah, except Darius and me not being aware. So Lucas was part of the product team of kununu, and then actually went to a company in Berlin. So awesome to see you here, Lucas. In a two-sided market like kununu, how do you balance the priorities of users and customers? And what degree of attention does B2B get versus B2C? Cheers from Berlin. So cheers back from Vienna. I think what's super important is to actually find out what are users' needs and what do they actually want. And then what are companies' needs and what do they actually want. And then you might be in a situation where those are not conflicting at all, which is super awesome, because then you can do a great job catering to both of those needs in the best possible way. But as with kununu and as with a lot of two-sided marketplaces, you might go in a situation where there are diametrically conflicting or maybe slightly conflicting things, what B2C or what B2B wants. I would say it's super important to actually take a look at your business model and what actually drives value. And for kununu, the clear decision was we focus on B2C, because only when there's employer reviews, salary data points, cultural assessments of companies that actually provide value, then users will actually consume those insights, and only then will companies feel the need that they should actually be present on kununu. So in our case, it's a super strong B2C case, because that's what actually creates the content and the value, in my opinion.
Okay, let me. I think
there was a question. Exactly, yeah, this one.
Yeah. Okay, Johannes. Yeah. Since you implemented your new way of working, have you also experienced improvements in internal KPIs such as employee retention rates?
Yeah, that's a great question. So when it comes to internal KPIs, I would say not so much KPIs that you can measure in a sort of hard and super exact way. So when it comes to employee retention, I think that's influenced by so many more factors, like being it, I don't know, a change in a management team, being it overall the mood of the company, being it a reorg that's happening or not. So what definitely has changed, and I read that question before and took a couple of notes, is I think a super improved buy-in from departments outside of product. So when you're actually not doing that within product in your, in some cases, maybe even an ivory tower, but you actually take people from customer support, from engineering, from marketing, and you have this diverse group of people, then obviously, if you sort of make this as a joint effort, they are actually bringing that to their teams and sharing that and sharing the enthusiasm and so on, if you're doing a good job. So I think overall, an improved buy-in was one topic. The other topic, I think, an improved communication overall, because you get to sort of know and work with people on a much more regular and intense basis than you maybe do otherwise. And I think the last one is, let's call it, less time needed for onboarding different teams to initiatives. So let's say if you in this diverse group of people actually come up with, okay, those are this is the purpose, this is the strategy, those are KPIs we want to drive, and we will do it with these 3, 4, 5 initiatives, then people are actually aware of what you will be doing next year. And they have a much easier time understanding what's coming sort of in their way. So when you're working in engineering, it's not like, hey, I didn't learn about this topic in the first kickoff meeting, but as people were already participating in this group, they were actually super aware of what's going to happen next year from the very beginning. So I think these 3 things were influenced in a positive way.
Great. Maybe I can ask 2 more questions that are a little bit related, but are from Mona and I. One is for Sebastian and Nikki, related with what are the biggest challenges that means working with large insurance companies, and the second one is related with working with huge companies. Is that if you think that these type of companies that tend to be more like business oriented are capable to do a transformation from the ground to a user-centered company. And that's it.
Interesting question. I think the 2 challenges, or 2 main challenges, lots of challenges, but let's say 2 main challenges. One being, especially from a startup perspective, is it's a very long time to market. So you can, from kind of establishing first contact to then having kind of the contract signed and starting a project, it can easily be a year as well, especially in the financial industry. So you kind of need to have the stamina as well to wait for that amount of time without going out of business. And the second part is a technological challenge that we see, because without kind of bad-mouthing our customers, we love them, of course, but a lot of their core systems are ancient. You have systems that have been introduced like 30 years ago, and now we come with our RESTful API high-tech standards, and they want to kind of connecting to their core systems. So that's a challenge. And one of the, maybe just a quick to the second, the technological challenge, there's something that Nick has mentioned, which is a research project that we're doing of creating kind of a common standard, the data standard in the financial industry as well, to make connections to those banks and insurance groups easier. And maybe there was and one last point. It's not directly related to your question, but it was a question, I think, how we define, because I keep on talking about small startup versus large company, and there was also a question of how we define the difference. And for me, more than like number of employees and revenue, it's kind of how the organization is structured. So where you have a clearly defined org structure where you can focus purely on your part of the product, and you have a marketing silo that's 100% focused on driving the marketing story, then for me, you're an established corporation, right, with check and balances in place. And when it's riskine, when Nikki and I have to do kind of wear all those different heads and work on every single aspect of the company, then for me, this is my personal definition of a small startup.
I can add one challenge that actually relates to the user-centered design point of view. Like we discussed earlier, as a B2B business, we sell to insurance companies that use our software internally. So the end users of that software are the advisors, like a bank advisor, like an insurance advisor. So they get a lot of weight in the decision making, because they're seen as the end users. And if advisors don't adopt a new software that's being launched, they will just stop it. So the point is that they have a lot of weight, but what about the actual end customers? So the people that walk into the branch, they are not actually sitting on the table of the decision makers, and this can make it quite hard to kind of collectively understand if you're focusing on the right products, on the right priorities, on the right features, because it's the advisors' needs that are in the forefront, and rather than their end customers. And this is, and I think this is a challenge of the B2B context in terms of how I understand it.
Johannes, do you want to add something related with this part of making a huge company user-centered?
Not for this one. I think a lot of good answers have been given by Sebastian and Nikki.
Perfect. So I think that's it. That's it for tonight. So, Mona?
Yeah, let's wrap it up. Thank you so much, especially to you guys, to our speakers, Johannes, Sebastian, and Nikolaus. Thank you so much for preparing your talks and answering all of those questions. Really great insights from you. And also special thanks to Fernando in the background, who was doing the graphical recording. We're very curious to see that soon. And we'll just post that in our meetup group. And obviously, thank you to our great audience. Thank you for asking amazing questions. And yeah, we'll hope to see you soon in the next edition of ProductTank Vienna. So have a great rest of the evening and see you soon. Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.